Guys, it is Brent Abel here with you today on another Web Tennis Players Workshop live webcast. We've got a special guest today with us, Jeff Salzenstein, and Jeff is going to help us, really kind of get organized on where the proper finish position is for, our top spin forehand groundy. And, a couple things before we get started today. Number one, if you're on Twitter and you hear something, you see something you like during the webcast, and you got a hankering to go ahead and blast out a tweet about it, would love for you to also include the hashtags, both for me, WebTennis, and then for Jeff at Jeff Salzenstein, or I should say pound Jeff Salzenstein. And so we're going to get right into it today. And for most of you, I know that you already are familiar with Jeff. I don't want to go through a lengthy intro, formal intro, because we've only got 30 minutes today, and I'm going to keep us only to 30 minutes. If you've been with me before, if you've been following Jeff at all, you know that he had a great junior career as a USA tennis player. Ended up going to Stanford, played 4 years at Stanford. Last couple years played number one. He played on 2 NCAA championship teams. Played in the men's pro tour for quite a while, and was one of the few guys ever, as he got older, to get a whole lot better. Finally cracked the top 100, in his late 20s, and was able to record 136 mile per hour first serve, and really had one of the nastier second serve kickers out there, and also I think known on the tour for having a really, really good forehand ground stroke that maybe, dare I say, was a little bit ahead of its time for what we're seeing these days. But Jeff is now back home in Denver, Colorado, teaching tennis and coaching tennis. And Jeff, I know you're feeling under the weather today with that sore throat and that cough, but listen, man, really appreciate you spending some time with us today.
It's awesome to be here. As always, Brent, you do great things with your website. You're helping so many tennis players, and you've actually been an inspiration for me because I want to help tennis players, and it's been great to be able to do that online in addition to on the court. So thanks for having me.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on today, and I know you're super busy right now with your first online tennis instructional product that you're launching right now. I know it's been probably not much sleep the last week or so, but and I want to talk about what you got going with that in a bit. But first, Jeff, I want to talk about the finish position that you like to teach on the forehand ground stroke. And I think one of the problems that we get into is we really aren't true. We're not consistent enough with really thinking that there's a specific finish position that we should get to. And I think too often what happens is we get a lot of mishits. We kind of get a lot of shanks. Occasionally the shanks kind of work out to our advantage. But tell us a lot about a specific forehand finish position that you like, that you teach. I've got a picture. I think that's you here, kind of demonstrating as a righty. But give us,
That's me.
Okay. Tell us about the forehand finish position.
Well, first off, that picture was flipped, so I wish I looked that good as a right-hander, but we made this course so that lefties and righties could benefit. But really just a quick background before I get into this high finish concept is, first of all, I didn't invent it. It's been taught for years. Great coaches have been teaching it. I first, became aware of it from Robert Lansdorp, who has coached 5 number ones in the world. He's a legendary high-performance coach in Los Angeles, California. There's actually a picture, I believe, on tennisplayer.net. Excuse me. There's a picture of Pete Sampras at 9 years old with this exact same finish. And as the game has evolved, you're seeing more and more of what I call a hand turn, or other people call it maybe a windshield wiper finish. And it's being taught maybe in the junior ranks. But this I would call almost old school finish, where you're finishing high and not quite wrapping over the shoulder, but you're extending out in front. I believe this finish has a huge place in the game of tennis still. I don't think it will ever go away because it teaches you how to extend and to hit through the ball. And that's a common problem that all players have, especially rec players, that they lose extension, especially when they get nervous. So this is a great finish if you want to learn how to drive the ball, if you want to get great extension and have a very penetrating forehand. That's the forehand a guy like Lansdorp is going to teach. The ball is going to go through the court. It's a flatter line drive, but it still has a tight spin on it. So if you're swinging with this finish and you don't have topspin, then you might have to go with a different option. But a lot of kids that I work with that hit too much spin or they hit short, I go with this finish and I force them to drive through the ball.
So you've really got, you've got the racket, as I call it, it's on its edge. It's not, you mentioned windshield wiper before, where it's really, you can see at the finish position here that you've come out through the ball, through the point of contact, and kind of released the racket head back into this position where, I guess for lack of a better term, I call it stays on its edge. And, I think you're right, Jeff, in that this finish ensures that, number one, that you extend out towards the target and you kind of take the opponent's baseline out of your, out of one of your problems. Because I think if you come off the ball too quickly, where we get a lot of mishits, a lot of shanks, and I think the fear there is that, well, you know what, I want to get some power, I want to swing out towards my target, but I don't want to continue going out there with a swing because I'm afraid that I'm going to hit the ball deep. And I think what you're saying here is this finish position, allows you that freedom to swing out through the ball towards the target and basically not worry about that opponent's baseline.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And a lot of times, rather than having someone change their stroke or manipulates their stroke and start flicking the ball to get it in, if the person is hitting the ball clean and they're missing long, like you were talking about, you just have, if you want to drive the ball, you've got to hit the ball lower over the net. And there's a lot of talk, especially in junior tennis, is you got to hit the ball 6 feet over the net. And believe me, there's a huge place for that. But if you want to drive the ball, penetrate the court, and you're standing on the baseline or near the baseline, you've got to go anywhere from 6 inches to 2 feet over the net. Because if you go 3 feet over the net and you drive it the way that I'm showing you in this picture, the ball probably is going to fly long. So you have to learn how to aim high and you have to learn how to aim low. Also, you see the racket on edge there. This is actually a great finish for a rec player that has an Eastern forehand. Your racket will be more on edge. The more that your racket moves under your hand moves underneath on the grip towards a semi-Western or even extreme semi-Western, like Nikovic, I would call them more of an extreme semi-Western, then the racket is going to maybe not be on his edge as much. So if you do have an Eastern forehand, this is a nice finish to have. And what I like about it is that if you get nervous and you're playing a match, if you've practiced finishing this way over and over again, you have a repeatable stroke to go to. People, their mechanics really break down when they get nervous because they don't really know where they finish. And I think that is one of the main ingredients to developing not only a great forehand, but great strokes and other, your volleys, your backhand. If you have good, solid finishes that you've practiced, you can repeat these strokes over and over again.
Let me ask you about, now we've talked about, and I'm pointing to the racket here being on its edge, and now kind of what I want to do is I want to talk about the left hand because, for me, this is really old school, and yet I think it's one of the great stroke mechanics of the forehand finishes with that left hand where you kind of swing out towards the way that you've got the left hand kind of position there. And for me, my weakest shot for a long time was my forehand because what I would do is I would take this left shoulder and kind of rotate it and just kind of really kick it out of the swing too early. And what would happen is I couldn't drive out, as you were initially talking about, Jeff. I couldn't really swing out through the ball towards the target. So, blah, blah, blah. I guess what I'm saying is I really love this position here with the left hand that it gives you a reference point of where you can swing to, but it really kind of helps keep that left shoulder from, kicking out and flying out of the, kind of flying out of the swing, way too early.
Brent, you bring up a great point, and a lot of players, I actually force the players that I work with to catch the racket on every forehand, whether they're finishing low, whether they're finishing high. And the reason why I have people catch the racket, again, is it gives you that ending point, and it also helps create space. And if you don't catch the racket, there's a tendency for people to wrap the racket too far around their body and to over-rotate, which is what you were just talking about. So again, the offhand is so important, because if you catch the racket, and what's important here, and you can't really see it in the picture, is I have people catch the racket towards the throat, not on the grip. A lot of people, when they catch the racket, they catch it down towards their other hand, and that, again, promotes being too scrunched, too close together. And spacing is an important consideration. I know you've probably seen this a lot, Brent, is when people struggle, they get too close to the ball. Well, a lot of times you can fix this just by knowing you're going to catch the racket on the throat every time in front of your body, like what we're seeing in this picture here.
Jeff, talk about, and this is a big deal for everybody, you've got your eyes, what I call artificially looking down at what was the point of contact. But the reason I like this is that your head, a lot like what I used to do, with this left arm, is the head can kind of do the same thing, in that, number one, it can pull kind of the swing path out of alignment. But number two, I think confidence-wise, when you don't have that urgency to pick, what I call peak, when you don't have that urgency to peak at what you hope is going to be the shot that you're intending, just like we see Federer doing, so many of these great players. I mean, what you're showing us here, Jeff, is that, and I know this is a demo forehand, but I got to believe that when you're playing, this is something that you're trying to achieve, with your head staying in this position, and your eyes, momentarily staying down at that point of contact.
Another great point, and there are certain principles in the tennis system that I teach. And again, when I talk about my tennis system, it's actually a compilation of all of the great coaches, all of the videos, all of the people I studied on the tour, my own experiences. So I've just taken the best of what everyone's offered, and one of them is what you just talked about, keeping your head or your eyes at contact well after the ball is gone. Federer, if anybody has studied his forehand, he probably holds his head at contact longer than any player. Can't really argue with his results, although we know he isn't doing as well as he has been in the past 6-7 years, but certainly he's got one of the best forehands of all time. And one of the reasons is he keeps his head at contact, and it forces you to stay on the ball. You're not going to over-rotate. There's this concept out there, I think, about talking about rotation. But I think that if you have other elements in place, the rotation will happen naturally. If anything, I see people over-rotating or rotating too early. Keeping your head at contact is going to help you fix that.
Okay, guys, I want to let anyone who's got a question for Jeff be able to ask it now. And there's two ways you can do it. On your GoToWebinar control panel, you can go ahead and click the hand icon, and you can ask Jeff in your own voice, assuming that we've got your audio set up okay. Or the other way is through the question dialog box. You can go ahead and type in your question, and I'll ask Jeff for you. So Don is asking you, Jeff, he says, this looks good, but no one in today's game hits like this. And my first response to that is that we're not teaching the 99.9% of the players out there who will never make a dime on the pro tour. We're not teaching them how to do what someone like Rafa does.
Well, yeah, and again, the system, and if anybody picks up my course, they'll get an understanding, or if anyone ends up, working with me, I have multiple finishes, and that's what I think separates maybe my coaching from somebody else. Is one coach might say, I only want you to finish high. And another guy might say, I only want you to finish low. Another guy might say, hey, just buggy whip, just like Nadal. I have a multitude of finishes that work for the unique player, what they need. So if a player needs to drive the ball, I'm going to encourage them to finish high. If a person needs more spin, I'm going to encourage them to finish lower and teach them that. In regards to the pro players, last time I checked, Radek Stepanek, who's 32 years old, who just won DC, he finishes very high on his forehand. It's not conventional. It's not, people would say don't do it, but how can you argue with this guy's results? Peter Korda, Australian Open champion. I realize he's not playing anymore. One of the best ball strikers of in ever, really. I had the great opportunity to play doubles with him at the French Open. And so really, even Djokovic, okay, he's finishing over his shoulder on a lot of his forehands. Now, I realize I'm not doing this in this picture, but again, what we're talking about is creating solid fundamentals for all players. So once you have a solid fundamental, sure, then you can do different things with your hand. But you're right, we're not really, the idea is not to, it's not to lock you into a box that you have to do it one way. This is an option for people, and it's an option that works quite well, especially when you're hitting the ball short or in the net.
Well, that's a good answer, because we're getting a lot of questions asking about the different kinds of forehand finishes other than this one here. And, someone asked about Rafa, how he finishes on the same side. I know, what does Lansdorp call that finish? The inverted?
The reverse forehand, and I call it the buggy whip because I got that from my coach.
Okay. I hit that shot from time to time, but I kind of think that the reason I hit it is I'm just a hair late. I mean, is that really more of an intended type of forehand? I know for the pros that they probably, it's a real intentional heavy spin to finish in the same side. But I think for me, more of a traditional, classic type of player, that when I do that, it's more because I'm just a hair late.
Well, we could do an entire webinar just on the buggy whip forehand, because that was one of the shots that did help me break the top 100 for the first time. It was a shot that when I look at videos when I was 12 years old, I was actually using it. When I look at videos of when I was on the tour at 22, 23, I was using it, but I was using it under stress or when I was late. But later in my career, I actually practiced that finish because I knew I needed it in certain situations. And I know that Pete Sampras, for a fact, practiced his running buggy whip or reverse forehand. He practiced that shot. It wasn't just, it just came out of nowhere. He actually worked on that shot with that finish. So that's something that players can practice. It can help your game on certain shots, but you have to know what you're doing. And there's a lot of misconceptions about I'll talk about it for about a minute or 30 seconds at the end of this webinar as we talk about the course that I'm launching right now. But really, it's a finish that people can practice if they do it correctly.
Let me see if I can unmute Don. And Don, can you hear me? Oh, Don, can you hear me, Don?
Yes, I can.
I'm gonna have to turn you down a little bit. Go ahead and ask Jeff your question.
So, would you start beginners starting like this, sideways, finishing over the shoulder? And then as they get better, going into more of the open stance and the windshield wiper finish?
Great question. And been coaching the last 4 years in Denver. And when I touched down there and started coaching, again, I had a philosophy and a system. And my system was that I was going to teach 6, 7, and 8-year-olds how to swing the racket exactly like the pros do. And I have kids that I work with between the ages of 6 and 10 or 11 who are turning their hand. That's basically what I call the windshield wiper, but there is a distinction with that finish with the windshield wiper. I think the windshield wiper is more of a flick. The turning of the hand, which is in the course that I've developed, is a fuller stroke that goes around the body more, so it's a smoother type of a swing rather than a flick. But I do think you should start kids with even all the finishes. I mean, tennis is supposed to be fun, and I think that if there's variety, I think variety is the spice of life. So show kids how the pros do it. Show them on video how they do it, as long as the principles are in place. And extension with all of these finishes are very important. Maria Sharapova gets herself in trouble with the buggy whip forehand because she does not extend. So that's something that, again, you have to be comfortable with how you're teaching to young kids. But if a player's having trouble creating spin, I would teach him how to turn the hand or that windshield wiper. If a player is hitting too much spin, I would force them to finish high. So you look at the student and you try to adapt to what they need, spin or drive.
Jeff, I'm getting a number of questions here about open stance, forehands, and how does that in your teaching philosophy, where does the finished position kind of work into the difference between a closed or an open stance forehand?
Great question. When you step into the ball, it's much easier to finish high like I'm demonstrating. It's harder to swing across the body or lower, the body doesn't feel as natural. However, if you do swing and you are stepping in, you're also allowed to bring that back foot around and square up with a wider stance. Again, something that I go into great detail in the course that I've created. But the open stance, I think it's more natural to finish lower and to go across the body. So a lot of times these finishes are stance or footwork dependent. But if you had to pin me down, again, with a rec player, learning to hit through the ball, having solid fundamentals, regardless of stance, I would focus more on finishing higher, like in this picture. But when you're actually playing points, you probably want that arm or that hand to wrap a little bit more over your body towards your head, not quite as in front. This, again, is a fundamental type of a picture that when the ball is being tossed to you, you can actually control this. When you're actually playing points, you should let the hand or the arm go further over your left shoulder, in this case, if you're a right-hander.
I've got a question that is near and dear to my heart. He's asking about a slice forehand, and for me, I mean, I just I don't use a lot of slice forehands as groundies, but I do use a lot of slice forehands as approach shots. And if someone were to stay back, and I'm not going to say that I don't ever use a slice forehand groundie, because I do, but the finish position on that, I mean, is that more, in your mind, sort of an extension of a forehand, maybe a longer forehand volley stroke?
I think so. And again, the way that I teach the volley is a little bit different than maybe how others do. And obviously actually, if you go to my website, I have a couple of videos on the volley. And I actually modeled the volley technique that I teach after Patrick Rafter, who had a unique style, but I believe was the best volleyer of the last 25 years. And but in terms of the slice forehand, I don't really teach it because I'm working primarily with junior players, and I'm thinking of where they're going to be when they're 18. And when that ball is sitting in the middle of the court, I have them grip it and rip it, and they have huge forehands. But I do think there's a place, especially for a rec player, because the slice is such a difficult shot to deal with, especially when you're coming to the net behind it. You got to pick that up. A lot of rec players might have trouble dipping the ball at someone's feet if they have more conservative grips. So I'm with you, Brent. I think that the slice forehand can be utilized in many different scenarios to win tennis matches, and probably need to think about adding a lot more slice forehand videos for a lot of players out there.
I got one more question then, and Jeff, I want you to tell us a little bit about your new tennis forehand solution product that you've just released, at midnight last night. And the question, our last question is, what about technique when, finished position technique, you're back in the baseline and you get a ball that's bouncing up high. This is not, as you're demonstrating here, in the picture, where it's probably a waist-high ball. This is more of a shoulder-high ball where, either you're going to, you probably have a choice there. Either you can kind of loop the ball back, which is going to be a slightly different finish than if you kind of, raise the setup position a little bit and kind of flatten it out and go forward through it. Have you got a standard finish position that you teach on this, Jeff, where someone has to deal with a shoulder-high ball back there?
Absolutely. Number one, there's different ways to approach it with footwork. Number two, when the ball gets up around the shoulder, what I teach the players that I work with is they're either going to finish lower across their body where they turn their hand, or they're going to use the reverse of the buggy whip finish. They're not going to use this high finish when the ball is shoulder high. This finish is specifically designed for that ball that's right in the wheelhouse. That ball where you get your feet set, you get set up. Don earlier had mentioned about stepping into the ball or being sideways, he mentioned. But if you notice, my feet are lined up in a way that I'm actually facing the net just a bit. I haven't stepped across my body where I'm totally sideways. So there's a way to move around the court where you're not feeling like you're too sideways. But getting back to your question about when the ball is shoulder high, you want to practice the lower finish, and you want to practice maybe even the buggy whip finish if you feel comfortable knowing what you're doing. So that's how I'd answer that one.
Okay, I want to take Jeff, take a couple minutes and I have looked through your offer, and I mean there is so much content. I know you've got 8 different, what do you call it, components, chapters to your lesson. Plus you've got 7 great bonuses, and plus I'm adding a bonus here if anyone buys your lesson through my link. But first of all, Jeff, give us 60 seconds, 90 seconds. What's in this new tennis forehand solution product you've got?
Sure. Well, this is a creation that took a year to develop, and it started because I wanted to figure out a way to teach coaches and players how to get better at tennis without having to rely on private lessons, that they could have access to something. And I wanted to get out on a global level. There's a huge mission behind this to really help people get better at tennis. And I believe that I bring old school and new school concepts together. Something is in this program for everyone if they want to improve their forehand. I've broken it down into the components that I believe create the best results. There's a component on targets, how to aim. There's a component on technique, where I break down the grip, the start, and the finish. There are 6 footwork patterns in there that I think are great for the foundation of movement. And there's many more that I teach, but I wanted to start with 6 solid ones to have people really get. Then there's tons of bonuses in there. We've got quick start checklists. We've got a success log. We've got a couple of audios. I've got an audio with Joseph O'Dwyer, who was my last coach, who helped me break the top 100 for the first time. And it's just loaded, like you said, with content, PowerPoint, presentations, manuals, videos. There really is something in there for everyone. And there's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears putting this together. And I really believe in this course, and I believe it can help anyone that takes action. I mean, that's the main thing, is when you get a program like this or you take a lesson from someone, really important that you take action and take responsibility for your game. And I know that the people on this webinar are obviously committed, because they wouldn't have signed up to listen to this if they didn't want to get better. So really exciting for me to release this. Actually, in the next 4.5 hours, there's a bonus that I've offered that's going to go away at midnight tonight. So if you're really interested in this product, you can pick up the extra module, which is I call it the Buggy Whip Magic, where I go through the 2 types of finishes with the different footwork patterns. And it's a nice complement to the program with the higher finish and turning the hand. So it's stocked with info.
Tell us about your guarantee.
Lifetime. Pick it up. You don't like it, you don't get better, let me know. You get a full refund. I'm in this to help people get better at tennis. I know you are too, Brent. So that's why it's awesome for me to come on this webinar, be able to share my stories, my tips, and go try one of the main tips in the program is going to help you. Might not be all the tips. I think all the tips will help, because I've seen it happen in my coaching the last 4 years. But yeah, lifetime guarantee. Keep it as long as you want. If you don't like it, let me know, and I'll try and make it better for you. I'll try and make something better for you down the road. So that's what I got.
Where you've got it is priced so low that even if you get just 1 or 2 little things out there that help improve the forehands, it's well worth it. And I just want to tell everyone that if you go over to webtennis.com/players, I've got a little bonus offer over there, and if you pick up Jeff's tennis forehand solution before this Friday night at 10 o'clock, I'm going to give you my complete forehand slice approach shot lesson. And it's made up of, I think it's 5 or 6 different videos, and it's been one of the more popular ones. And just like we talked about, Jeff, I mean, I really think the forehand slice approach is just such a nasty shot that really can complement, what your product's got. And so guys, I'm gonna shoot you over there right now. Here's what the website looks like over at webtennis.com/players. And now let me get this one here. And here's the post. All you need to do is just go to this post, and you'll see it's the first one there, and a little bit more information, and click through that link there. And then once you go ahead, pick up your copy of Jeff's lesson, just send me an email with a copy of your confirmation that you get from Jeff, and I'll send you that lesson. So Jeff, listen, man, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on today. I know you're feeling under the weather with that sore throat, but you stepped up and well done today, Jeff. Thanks so much.
Hey, thanks. And just real quick, want to be clear on the next couple of days. If you pick it up tonight, you're going to get the Buggy Whip Magic bonus. If you get it by 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So you got 2.5 hours to get it. If you're not ready to do that, the launch sale is going to end Thursday at 9 p.m. So Thursday moving into Friday. So you only have today, tomorrow, or Thursday to pick this up. Then it will go at its regular price after the launch. So just want to be clear on that. Good. So that everybody knows what's going on.
Okay, well that seems like a fair time frame. Okay, Jeff. Well, listen, get back to work. I know that you got a lot to do in the next few days. And
thank you, sir.
Thanks again. And guys, thanks for being with me today. And Jeff, if you've got any questions that we didn't get to, and I apologize, there were a boatload of questions that I just could not get to, you can send me an email, askbrent@webtennis.net. Or come over to this post right here at webtennis.com/players. It's the first one listed there. And just go ahead and you can leave a comment, and I'll get back to you just as soon as I can. So thanks again for joining me. Everyone have a great day out there. And